let's maybe give an example, Brian, of what that might look like if someone, says, okay, I want to buy a home. I'm not finding anything that checks all the boxes. So now I need to lean into this because I think a lot of consumers don't even realize this is an option. And so for that consumer, what does that look like? And so maybe give us some examples of some hypothetical numbers.
Let's just say there's a house that comes to market for, we're going to make it simple, 150,000. Both an investor and a homeowner has an opportunity to buy that house.
Wait,
If the investor buys it,
let me stop you there, because that doesn't exist anymore, not even in St. Louis. So let's go a little higher with those numbers. Let's go more realistic on the numbers. When you think of a renovation loan, I think most people probably cringe, maybe even run the other direction because of the assumption of the challenges that might come with executing on said loan. Because let's be honest, even just a standard mortgage sometimes can be very painful. But we want to talk about why that is a misconception, at least with USA Mortgage. So I am bringing on today a couple of guests, one being none other than Brian Nowakowski, who is the VP of Renovation at USA Mortgage, and a real estate agent by the name of Matt Bergjans, who is based out of the St. Louis area and is not just a real estate agent, but he is a consumer who used the product and had some positive things to say about it. So we thought nothing better than bringing that testimony onto this episode. So fellas, welcome to the show. I am going to start with you, Matt, because you're the star of this show, I think, in our perspective. And so if you can kind of introduce yourself, talk about, what your history or your how long you've been in the business and what you do, because you do some investing and all sorts of things. So tell us a little bit about yourself, and then we'll get into the experience itself.
Sure. So I've been a real estate agent for 6 years. I'm also a real estate investor. So I flip houses, I buy and hold multifamily property through our resources that we have. I have a relationship with a team of contractors that we utilize for any of the houses that we flip, myself and my business partner. So, that has allowed myself and to really get through this process a lot smoother than maybe your average buyer who wouldn't have the same resources and experience.
Yeah. And you are with the Gelman team, which is a very prominent, very successful real estate team in the St. Louis area, correct?
Correct. Yeah. So I'm with the Gelman team. We're under EXP Realty. So we're the number one full service listing team out of St. Louis. We're the number one ranked real estate team in the state of Missouri based on our listing sale volume.
I love it. And I bring that up because although you're right, you have expertise above an average consumer, you also have that experience that can make it a nightmarish experience for the lender because you know so much. And so with that, I'm going to segue over, Brian, if you can kind of introduce yourself, and then we're going to get into the story. So Brian, you're relatively new to USA Mortgage. You are, as I mentioned, the VP of Renovation. Tell us a little bit about your background in the business.
Yeah, so been here at USA Mortgage for just about 6 months. Been in the business since 98. I don't know how many years that makes it, but been in business a very long time, cut my teeth in the business doing renovation and construction loans. It was an easy segue for me as I understood contractors very well because growing up, I was involved in a lot of construction projects, being on job sites and pouring concrete, whatever the case may be. And so for me, it's as with any project, it was just a communication thing. It was a simple solution to what many people think is a complicated problem, which is just laying out a plan and communicating the plan. And over the years, I've just developed the the niche of renovation lending. And again, it was unintended. It was more of picking up the pieces that somebody else didn't want to do, and then it just continued to grow, filling that niche. In 2011, I went to a company. They were pretty much the only ones still doing renovation loans after the last housing crisis. And when I went there, they were like, "Listen, you're our last hope." If I steal something from Star Wars, they're like, "We're getting rid of this program. It stinks. It doesn't work. Nobody's happy with it." And I said, just keep it around. Let me just do a couple loans. We did some loans and the problems went away. And then I grew from there, from being a regional, or I would say an area renovation specialist, to a regional, to divisional, to national, supporting it nationally. And that's what I'm bringing here. Just solving the problems with renovation loans, communicating, setting the expectations, and then laying out a plan of how we attack the problem.
Awesome. And you're based out of where?
Maryland.
Awesome. We won't hold that against you. So it's 2-1 here, Midwest versus the East Coast. So, all right, well, let's get into it. So, Matt, you decided to buy a primary residence, or tell us the story about how this even came together and how you ended up with using USA.
Yeah, so I stumbled across an off-market opportunity in an area that I wanted to buy a primary residence in, and I wanted to ideally find something that I could renovate, customize myself, add value to, but also, as you guys, I'm sure, are aware, in today's market, it's very low inventory. So it's very challenging for most buyers to find a house without competing with other buyers. So this actually worked out perfect for me. Came across the off-market opportunity, put it under contract. I discovered the renovation loan as an option. So that way, it allowed me to customize the house, still bank off the equity gain from being able to improve it substantially. I didn't have to pay out of pocket. So, it came with a higher monthly payment, but I was able to save significant cash out of pocket, which is how we traditionally, operate when it comes to flips. So all in all, it really checked all the boxes in what I was looking to accomplish.
Can we break that down? And I can come from either one of you on that, but understanding what the options are as it relates to a renovation loan. So maybe talk to the most common reasons why, first of all, someone would take out a renovation. And then number two, kind of what are the options? Because as you just mentioned, nothing out of pocket, which seems kind of unheard of. But I don't know, Matt, or maybe Brian, if you want to talk to that, like what are the most common reasons that you see a consumer taking out this type of loan?
So I'm going to jump in first. Matt touched upon it. Right now, it's inventory problems, right? And when we talk about inventory, it's not really so much a lack of inventory as much as it is a lack of quality inventory. So from like a housing stat perspective, I think it's almost like 60% of our aging housing stock, 60% of it is more than 40 years old. A lot of those houses have a lot of deferred maintenance. They're behind in the energy efficiency department. And so we have a lot of aging inventory that people would just look past, right? And then I'm sure both of you know that there's more stats about how people can't envision what a house looks like and when it's empty, and it talks about the importance of staging. Well, if they can't imagine what a good house looks like without furniture, imagine what they can't imagine for a house that is dilapidated, for a lack of a better word. Now, Matt, I don't remember in your project if we would use the term dilapidated to describe its existing condition. It might have been just standard, outdated, needed some fresh paint, new bathrooms, that type of stuff. But when we're talking about why somebody wants to do it, to me, it starts with two things. Inventory helps solve the inventory crisis. And then Matt also mentioned value add, right? So now you can acquire a property, get some instant equity, and be able to acquire a desirable house that you want at a significantly lower price.
Is that the case, Matt?
Matt?
What's your take?
Yeah, absolutely. So for me, when I look at houses from a real estate agent's perspective, anything that comes to the market that's completely decked out, most of the time is done by another investor who flips it and then puts it to the market. So those sort of houses in today's market, as long as they're priced right, I mean, those will typically generate the most activity. So not only is that investor getting a profit margin percentage from the sale, just based on the ARV, but also in a market like we're in right now, they're banking off the low inventory, which for a lot of people is generating multiple offers on listings. So that's driving price up even further. So for a renovation loan like this, again, for me, it was different because I found something off market. So that kind of eliminated the competition component to it. But I was able to remove that profit margin percentage that an investor would usually get. So that is money that I didn't have to pay. Plus, I was able to customize the house to my liking, add value to it. So I got the equity growth from it. So it really worked out in several different ways for me.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I want to also immediately put to bed that this is not just for investors, right? I mean,
yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's correct me if I'm wrong, Brian, but it's not made for investors. It's really made for end users. It's obviously there for investors, but the way the process works, from my understanding, it's actually tailored more to help end users, someone who's actually going to live in the house who may not be familiar with the process, because it offers resources that allow them to almost act like they would be an experienced investor without having the experience. Is that fair to say, Brian?
Yeah, I think that's right on point. I mean, it is designed originally for homeowners to create homeownership opportunities, to help address minimum property requirements that weren't meeting a lot of lenders' standards. But we do have an investor option, but geared towards homeowners. And I think that's the real big opportunity here. Again, help solve inventory, create value, add value. And you're getting a house with little or no compromise. Matt, you touched upon that profit margin from flippers. If you were to estimate, what that margin might be, do you have any idea as a percentage or dollar amount what you might say that would be? Because that profit margin is really the key of what we're talking about when we say how you as somebody who's going to live in a house can beat out investors, right? Because you're not interested in the profit margin. This is for you to live in.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think that margin definitely varies, but I would say on average, 10 to 20%.
Give someone the numbers.
Yeah. So from like an investor perspective, the way most investors will run numbers is they take perceived ARV, after repair value of a home. They multiply that number by a percentage to allow for profit margin. So if you want to have a 20% profit margin, you'd take the ARV number, perceived ARV number, you multiply that by 0.8. That gives you a net number, and then you deduct the cost it would be to get it from its current condition to the renovated condition. And that's how most investors come up with their offers that they make when running numbers on properties. So when you do the renovation loan, rather than buy a house that's already been renovated by another investor, you're eliminating that, whatever that profit margin is. You're just going straight into whatever you're buying it for, and then the cost to improve it, which again, you don't pay out of pocket. It's rolled into the loan.
Yeah. And Brian, and obviously we're talking about, I feel like we're still talking in the terms of more of an investor. And I think I wouldn't call it necessarily the elephant in the room as much as the opportunity especially on the real estate and lending side, that not a lot of people have their eye on right now is what's coming. And we were talking about that on another call this morning with Brian's group, and about how, you by the year 2030, they predict that most baby boomers will be out of their homes. And as everyone knows, in the real estate space, they have stayed in place, unlike pretty much any generation before, longer than anyone. The average, time in home is much longer than it's ever been. And what's going to happen over the next 6 years is you're going to see these two generations, millennials, which are really starting to pick up some steam, and then Gen Z, who arguably is going to be probably one of the most aggressive home buying generations in the history of home buying, that no one's really has their eye on right now because half of them are still below the age of 18. But you're going to see this generation of different humans who do things differently than Gen X and baby boomers. And they're going to have really no choice, because, there's builders aren't building homes. And so they're going to be buying these homes that either need to be renovated or are just simply the style of somebody who was in their 70s. And I think we're going to see a massive influx of renovation potential loans, because you're going to see again, millions of homes that need work done, and millions of home buyers, especially when you lump in millennials who've been sitting on the sideline. And I think half the reason they're not buying is because homes are overpriced, and they're overpriced and need work. And so I think this is something that, if you're listening to this and you're in the industry, you need to maybe shift a little bit of your efforts in your marketing and who you're targeting into this arena, and understanding renovation loans. If I was a real estate agent, I'm going to go work up my knowledge base, because I want to start educating consumers about this, because I think it's so incredibly potentially important. And so I don't know which one of you wants to speak to that, but that's what gets me excited, because I think, and Brian, it just came up this morning, ironically, and I was like, oh, damn, I hadn't thought about that. But wow, there's going to be a lot of opportunity.
So, Jeff, you brought up a good point about it seems like we're still talking about the investor, right? And it feels that way because I'm trying to drive home the point is the investor is the one who's really taking the opportunity away from a home buyer, if you think about it.
Yeah.
And so what we're trying to illustrate, all those houses that are coming up in 2030, there's going to be huge opportunity for the investors to gobble them up. And when the investors do, they're going to resell it to the people who are sitting on the sidelines, which is the Gen Xers, and then they're going to resell them to them with a 20% profit. Well, the Gen Xers or Gen Zers, what are they? Gen Zers, I'm sorry. If they realize if they could just acquire it instead of the investor and do the same thing the investor is going to do, now they're buying the house 20% cheaper. So that house that would have been $300,000 if it was brought to the market by the fix and flipper, they could now acquire for $240,000, and that's a big difference. I mean, anybody would love to get 20% off on anything. If somebody said you can go buy your next car, I'll give you 20% off. That's a huge discount. The opportunity's there for them, right? This is the opportunity they need to nurture. It's not that it's not there. It's just previous generations haven't taken advantage of it because they haven't had to, because they weren't forced with higher home prices. But if they want to compete in today's environment, this is how they do it.
Yeah, I'd like to break that down, but I guess before we do, Matt, anything to add to that conversation?
Yeah, I think ultimately what I really like about the renovation loan is it should open consumers' mindset to not just want to look for something that's move-in ready, to maybe consider some of these houses that I wouldn't call it dilapidated, but just like you said, dated, that are, have the style of a 70s home. So because, it doesn't appear that home values are going down anytime soon. And for those people who are just waiting for the right house rather than finding a house in the right area that has, good bones that they can customize on their own, I think it's a great opportunity.
So now that we've kind of set that table, let's maybe give an example, Brian, of what that might look like if someone, says, okay, I want to buy a home. I'm not finding anything that checks all the boxes. So now I need to lean into this because I think a lot of consumers don't even realize this is an option. And so for that consumer, what does that look like? And so maybe give us some examples of, some hypothetical numbers.
Yeah. So with anything with real estate, location, 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 it starts with a consumer's desire to be in a specific location. And then once they find that location, they usually set some parameters. And Matt, you'll probably tell me that, that they're looking within a certain price range, right? And it's maybe 200 to 250 or 250 to 350, whatever the case may be. But they're automatically ignoring a huge part of the inventory. They're not even seeing it just because they're not thinking about the opportunity. They don't understand the opportunity. They're not comfortable with the opportunity. In the price range they're looking at, they are going to see a lot of those fixed and flipped houses. What we need to do is get everybody's pivot their thinking to say, listen, we're having a tough time finding you something in your area, in your price point, but there's a lot of inventory that's left. Maybe we should start taking a look at that. And maybe we start thinking about what could be instead of what is. They all watch the HGTV shows and they see these great flips and these houses that are built overnight and they get excited about it. But the reality is the market's still not mature for it in the sense of people aren't pulling all those components together. The investor market is, but for an owner occupant, it's not quite there yet. The resources are there. But if we get them thinking about it and get them comfortable with it, then it's almost like they're buying a new house, right? They get to pick their finishings. They get to pick their floor colors. They get to pick the cabinets, and they're building it to what they want, which makes that payment much more palatable when you're buying a house, again, with little to no compromise. And because of your oversight, everything's been renovated and it's improved to your specs. So does that answer your question about how it starts and what it looks like?
Yeah. And then let's throw a hypothetical out there.
So I like sharing this example. Let's just say there's a house that comes to market for, we're going to make it simple, $150,000. Both an investor and a homeowner has an opportunity to buy that house.
Wait,
the investor buys it.
Let me stop you there, because that doesn't exist anymore. Not even in St. Louis. So let's go a little higher with those numbers. Let's go more realistic on the numbers.
Sure. All right, let's go. What do you want to go? 250? Because remember, I'm adding construction costs to it, right?
Matt would know better than I would. And so, yeah, Matt, what is an average price point on something like this?
Yeah, well, it's micro market dependent, but like for me, 1,000 square foot ranch in St. Louis City, I got off market in the right neighborhood for 245. My renovation loan was 60,000. So that brought the the total to 305. Now it actually appraised at 315 for mine in particular. But that's solely based on past sales. So that doesn't take into account current competition, low inventory, market conditions and whatnot. So, there's, at least in my opinion, there's a good chance that could sell much higher.
Okay. Do you have any speculative, numbers of what you think that might end up looking like for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think I like to run numbers with a conservative mindset, but if I were to list my home today, it would probably be at 325, and I think that's at a competitive price that, given the current market conditions, could result in multiple offers, in which case it could, realistically sell 350 or even higher.
That's awesome. In a world where, everybody's, and this, Matt, paying more than what the house is even worth, because that's how competitive the market is, to get into something and actually walk into equity, that's gold.
Yep.
So Brian, maybe go a little bit deeper. So now that we went off the rail for a second, let's use 250. Matt gave his example. But how does it work? I mean, the way Matt describes it, okay, I bought 245, I needed 60. it can't be that simple. There's got to be obviously an appraisal involved. What's the LTV, the loan to
Yeah.
value? Like, tell us more.
Yeah. So from a lending standpoint, loan to value, we're going to 97%. We can go up to 97% of the acquisition cost. Now, here's the key. Your acquisition cost is going to be your purchase price plus your renovation escrow. So we add those two together. You buy it for 250, you're putting 90 into it. Now we're all in at 340. We'll lend you up to 97% of that.
Wow.
When we talk about what's different for renovation loans, I always preach this when comparing it to a regular loan. It's very similar, same credit qualifying, same terms, all that. The only thing that's different is we need to figure out three things. What are we doing to the property? Who's doing it? And how much does it cost? The sooner we can figure out those three things, the sooner we just have our loan identified. We know what path we're going, and we can get to closing. So they don't necessarily take longer to close. It just takes longer for people to make decisions. Now, to help them make the decision, when you buy a house with the intent of doing a renovation, when you go under contract, typically most people schedule, I'm going to test you here, Jeff. What do you typically schedule immediately after you're under contract?
An appraisal?
No, before the appraisal.
Inspection?
There you go, home inspection. Yep. So here, instead of doing a home inspection, you're going to engage a consultant. And a consultant's role is to come out. Most of them are qualified home inspectors. They're going to evaluate the property with you. They're going to tell you what's going to be required from the lender standpoint. You're going to tell them as the buyer what you want included in the project. And then they're going to try and make sure that the project that's intended to be done can fit your budget. All right. That's a really important piece, because that takes that burden off the table of a contractor having to deliver realistic news to an unrealistic buyer that thinks they might get a 3-story addition for $30,000. Right. But most importantly is that consultant's then going to be able to provide a report to the prospective buyer to give to prospective contractors. That report breaks it up into 35 different line items. It states what's going to be done and what they think reasonable market price for that work should be. So now what we've done is established a baseline. They can engage contractors, and as they engage contractors, we can have the appraisal ordered, because this report has determined or told us what we're doing to the property. Now we're just trying to figure out how much is it going to cost, which we know what reasonable range it should be, and who's going to do it. Once we get the appraisal back and the...
Can I stop you real quick? When it comes to getting those bids, is there a certain criteria of who you can use? So let's just say I'm a buyer and my father-in-law has a business where he does fix it and, repair work. Can I hire him?
They have to be licensed and insured in the jurisdiction where the property is located in. So that's like the first prerequisite. That's the only thing that we require. On an FHA loan, the parties can't be related, but on a conventional loan, if you want to have your father-in-law, that wouldn't be a problem.
Okay, carry on.
But they do have to be licensed and insured. And then a subset of that is they have to understand how they get paid, when they get paid. So contractors that want a huge deposit up front, that can't justify why they're going to have the deposit, that they just collect it because essentially they may need money for another job, those contractors aren't going to work.
Got it. Okay. So and continue with the process.
Yeah. So, if we're looking at where we are in the process, we may be under contract, sitting at day 10, 12 under contract. We figured out what we're doing. We're ordering the appraisal's being completed. While that's being completed, contractors being selected. Appraisal comes in. Hopefully at this point, the borrower selected their contractor. We firmed up the numbers. We know the final budget. Now we're just submitting underwriting and then going to closing. Couple things just to make sure you understand, and most people understand, is the work doesn't get done before settlement. It gets done after settlement. So when we go to settlement, our loan proceeds are going to fund the pay off the seller. The renovation funds are going to be put into an escrow account to be dispersed as the project is completed. The key here is when we do this process, and this is really what I'm most excited about with Matt's experience, is that when we don't do the things right from contract to settlement or contract to closing, the problems are going to come up from closing to completion after the loan closes, right? So if we didn't set those right expectations, we didn't have conversations about how the process works, and the contractor gets in there and starts working, and then things go sideways, it can get real ugly real fast. And there are the things that become a problem, right? So if you've made it to closing in a perfect world, you still got that last phase you got to complete that most loan officers and mortgage companies aren't familiar with, right? You just getting to closing isn't enough, like, because this thing's going to come back like a boomerang and all the problems are going to start festering and coming up top. So when Matt reached out and told me, hey, we're done, I mean, I thought that was pretty impressive, because Matt, you were what, 3 months to get your project done? 2 months? I don't remember the specifics, but it seemed very quick, and it definitely worked like clockwork, because I didn't hear any problems.
Yeah, mine was about 3 months in total, but there were some unexpected obstacles that we had to work around. So it could have been a lot sooner than that. Again, for me, just to set the right expectation for any consumers out there, for me, I think it was streamlined a bit faster just because I had my contractor picked out right away. I knew exactly who I was going with. It's a reputable contractor who does a great job in a timely manner. And I had a very clear vision of what I wanted to do with the property going into the process. So there wasn't, a whole lot of decision making that needed to take place once the renovation started. It was all pretty much ready to go. So
then, I guess there's two questions. One, going back to the beginning with the contractor piece, if a customer doesn't have any connections to contractors, is there any assistance that can be provided here? Is this something that maybe the real estate agent or the mortgage company can help with? Is that typical or not as much?
Yeah, typical, I would say the real estate agent, right? Like, we don't want to get involved in referring to contractors or any of that part of the process, because it crosses too many lines. We're also the ones giving them the money, right? So Matt and the real estate agents in the marketplace, they're the best ones served. This one, we talk about developing this market. So in the traditional home buying process, agents know who their go-to people are when it comes to title companies, home inspectors, and lenders. Many of them don't have go-to contractors, right? You ask them, they're like, I might know somebody, I might know a handyman. Yeah. This is how this process has to evolve, right? This is you got to have good contractors in your back pocket, and you can refer at the drop of a dime and just say, yep, this is who we're going to go. We're going to bring him in, and we got to have the consultant. Consultant's going to write up the report. You're going to give the report to this contractor. They're going to give us the numbers. We're going to move forward.
Got it. So you mentioned that once all that's done and you get to closing, you're not done yet because you didn't get the money to actually do the renovation. So you close, you now own the property, but now is the process. And Matt's took 90 days. What is a typical time frame? Is there one?
No, I mean, Matt, I'll defer to you on some of this, but every project's unique and has its unique challenges. I mean, from a consumer standpoint, the hard part for them is the idle time. And unfortunately, there's always going to be idle time in between a demo phase and a rough plumbing. And it's very exciting in these projects early on. I mean, when we're following and talking to consumers, the first 2-3 weeks, they're like, we're going to be done way ahead of schedule, right? Because tearing everything down and framing everything up is the easy part, and getting everything roughed in and even getting the drywall. But when you start getting to the finishings and the lead time on tile that they picked and vanities and all that kind of stuff, it can really slow it down. So it's a process. I wouldn't set any expectation that, that it's going to be like it is on HGTV, where you have people there working every day and it's 24 hours a day and that they're in and out in 2 weeks. But again, it's something very specific to the market, where your contractors are, what's your permitting office, things like that. So that's where I want to defer to Matt. You can talk a little bit more about in that area, what it's like.
So what it's like from like a flip perspective, what a time frame is on an average flip.
Yeah.
I mean, I would say,
Yeah, I mean, just in general.
yeah, I mean, for us, it's typically 4 to 6 weeks, but that, you know, that's very quick. That's without the consultant being involved. That's without, you know, other inspectors and permits and whatnot. So I would say, you know, the 3 month time frame for mine was, it was probably what's going to be a reasonable time frame for most people, as long as, you know, they don't spend a substantial amount of time thinking about what they want it to look like.
What about you know, things that come up, you know, changes, you know, or you know, they get these bids and then you start knocking down walls and you start doing things and you realize, oh shit, there's, you know, alert, there's an
Yeah.
issue, we got to deal with it. How do they get access to potentially more funds if needed? Is there a way?
So we do have an established contingency fund. So if your project's 60,000, we may do at least a 10% contingency, which means we have $6,000 to draw on. Some we may do 15 to 20%. We rely on the consultant and everybody's input on that, right? So somebody may say, look, I really don't know what's behind this wall. It doesn't look good, or this foundation may be an issue. I can't, you know, really tell until I get in there. So can we do 20% contingency, right? So it's just extra money set aside above and beyond. If that money runs out, then we need to start looking at maybe stealing some money from other parts of the project. So if we're early on in the project and we know, like, again, it's a foundation issue, we uncovered it earlier, and you wanted premium kitchen cabinets that were $30,000, we need an extra 10, you may be stuck with getting $20,000 cabinets. If we're later on in the project and we're just out of money, unfortunately, it just has to come out of the borrower's pocket. If there's no way to shift money or reallocate money, then somebody's going to have to come up with the money. Very rarely do we run into that. But nonetheless, we do. Some of the other issues we try and avoid, like when you're talking about renovations, some of them just could be cosmetic and deferred maintenance, right? And I think that's a simpler project, like Matt was explaining, what might be 4 to 6 weeks. But we can do large scale stuff. I mean, we can add additions, we can add bathrooms, bedrooms. A lot of row homes we add third floors on. So some of those projects take 6 to 8 to 12 months. We can tear off the roof. We can tear it down to the foundation in some cases and rebuild up. So it's a large scale. It's not just, you know, paint and freshening up.
You know, I'd like to make a proposal that we change the terminology from contingency to an oh shit fund. And then we actually incorporate that as a line item on the closing statement, just for entertainment purposes, because this is stressful and boring.
Oh yeah.
You know, can we do that? Can I make a proposal and send that off to the CFPB or Fannie and Freddie?
We'll get you on the call with Fannie.
All right,
Yeah,
perfect. I'm sure they'll take me very serious with my flat bill hats and t-shirts. Yeah. All right, cool. So, all right, now we made it through. Matt, you made it to the end. You closed. Now you do your renovation, your 90 days or whatever the time frame it takes. Then what happens?
Yes, so then they'll just do a final inspection to ask for all permits to be closed out and provided to the lender. And then for me, the oh shit fund wasn't used up completely. So there was additional money left over. So that was, once everything was all closed out, that was applied to directly to the principal of the loan.
Nice.
Yep.
Nice. So you weren't taking that money and going on vacation, in other words. Doesn't work that way.
Nope.
I like it. I actually, I'm more excited that you just made a second motion for the oh shit fund line item. So thank you for that. I appreciate that. Awesome. What am I missing? What have I not potentially asked that might be something that a consumer, or, you know, maybe more importantly, a loan officer or a real estate agent listening to this is thinking to themselves, what about that? Is there anything that you think that maybe I missed?
No, I mean, I would just say, I'm not sure if we already touched on this, but it's in terms of money down. I'll defer to Brian on this, but for me, I only had to put 5% down. So I know for a lot of, you know, first-time home buyers or just buyers in today's market with how inflated prices are, you know, putting down larger down payments could be an issue. So this product does allow you to put less money down. I believe as low as 3 or 3.5%. Is that right, Brian?
Yep. 3%. We can get up to 3%.
3%. Is it just first time home buyer for 3%?
3%, first time home buyer, or if they meet the income eligibility limits for low to moderate income, that option. What is really exciting that was recently introduced was the expansion to allow it to be used with 2 to 4 unit properties on a renovation loan. If your borrower is going to occupy one of it, I'm sure everybody's aware, the Gen Zers, right? They use that term house hacking. What is really big with them in house hacking is getting a multi-unit property, right? That's how they're addressing the affordability issue. You get 3 other people paying your mortgage. And up until now, in the last couple months, it wasn't available. It was only available on a 1 to 2 unit property. So now if you have a 4 unit property, or even if you have a large, you guys really don't have row homes there in St. Louis, do you? They look like row homes, but they're not. Do you guys have that? I'm talking about row homes.
St. Louis.
But they are big houses, right? They're big square rectangle houses that, have land on each side. We can convert those into a multi-unit. So if you want to do a 4 unit, that's a big opportunity. Again, we're talking about how to make it more affordable for the next generation. These are some of the issues. So that would be the big thing I would say we didn't touch upon. Other than that, it's as simple as I described it. If everybody just follows along and just is aware of what's coming next.
I love it. Matt, what are your thoughts in terms of now that you are someone who's used the product, you had a great experience with the product as a real estate agent. Do you have any plans for, maybe putting some marketing efforts behind this?
Yeah, I mean, it's another tool that I can use in my tool belt when advising clients who are looking to buy. It's also, I mean, it's like we talked about it's an opportunity for people to act as investors as well and build wealth. So overall, I was very pleased with the process. It exceeded my expectations, and I certainly, will be informing others of it moving forward.
I love it. I love it. Fellas, this has been insightful. Thank you so much for joining me today. I think this is really awesome. Matt, thank you for being an advocate and being willing to share. And frankly, I guess, Brian, thank you for making Matt a happy customer, because I don't think Matt would be here if he wasn't. So it's a double win when the real estate agent is also the customer and the real estate agent's happy. So great job from both of you. And thank you guys for being on. And hopefully we can continue these conversations and they become as hot as a topic as I'm predicting.
Appreciate you hosting us, Jeff.
Absolutely.
Matt, thanks for jumping on.
Thanks, Jeff. Thanks, Brian.